Hi everyone, Brandon from Your Right Website here. Today's video is all about web accessibility, and we're going to be doing a web accessibility audit. So what is a web accessibility audit? Well, that's where we go into a website and take a look and see if it meets the accessibility requirements that would be necessary for somebody who's using a screen reader or other assistive device. So why is web accessibility important? Well, not everyone is able to view the web the same way that we are. Some people can't use a mouse, for instance, and some people need to use what's called a screen reader that actually reads the website aloud to them rather than being able to visually see the screen. I'm here on Windows today because unfortunately Linux hasn't quite caught up to where Windows and Mac are as far as some of the accessibility tools, mainly the screen reader. The screen reader that comes with Linux Mint isn't really that great, so I'm going to go into Windows. And in Windows, I'm going to view a website that I put together just as a demo. And this is going to be the site that we're using today for our accessibility audit. So why is accessibility important? It's because, like I mentioned, not everybody can view the web the same way that we do. So if I'm able to do the video editing correctly, in a second here, you're going to see what somebody who needs a screen reader might see when they look at this website. Or like I mentioned, somebody might not be able to use a mouse, or there may be other mobility issues that somebody has when viewing a website. So the accessibility audit really just ensures that your website is available to everyone. And also there is a legal aspect to this as well, because especially if you have a business that is in a physical location, you're going to want to make sure that your website is accessible, because there have been cases, courts have found that your website is an extension of your physical store. So it's important to at least have a base level of accessibility for your website to be in compliance with some legal standards like the Americans with Disabilities Act, for instance. So without further ado, we're going to jump in and we're going to start the accessibility audit. So the accessibility audit really consists of two parts. The first part is we're going to be doing some automated scans of the website. And that's going to pick up some very kind of basic, common issues that come up with websites. And these are scans that anyone can do using free online services and free plugins. And then the second part of the accessibility audit is where we're going to actually go in and manually test the website using a screen reader, which is why I'm here on Windows. If you're on a Mac, there's also a screen reader called VoiceOver. On Windows, it's called Narrator. And we'll be going into that in the second part of the video. But to jump right in, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take this website and I'm going to run it through the Google PageSpeed tool, which is just pagespeed.web.dev. And this tool goes over a lot of common issues that websites have, not only with accessibility, but also with performance. So we're going to take a look at the site in this tool and see what it says as far as accessibility. And here we go. So here's the website. Performance score is not quite where I want it. That's probably because it's using a ton of images, a lot more than I would usually use, as well as it's using a new plugin. I used a new plugin called Regallery on the homepage, which is really beautiful. I'll show you that in a second. But it uses a lot of images, which is this guy actually down here. So this is a really beautiful plugin. It's a free plugin for WordPress. But I think the performance score here is really just getting kind of hit just because we probably have about 20 or so images on the site. But what I'm really interested in, and this should be the same on mobile and desktop, is this accessibility score. So normally if your website is not accessible, you're going to see some indication of that with a tool like this. This website I know because it's based on a template that I use kind of as a starting point for my projects. is pretty accessible. The only issue it looks like it's complaining about is the heading elements. So when it says heading elements are not in a sequentially descending order, this is kind of a warning. You don't need to have your headings always in a sequential order. It can be difficult with the way like your CMS is outputting content. What is recommended is that you have your headings like your H1, your H2, and your H3, etc. in descending order, so you never have an H3 before an H2. But that just is really kind of hard to implement in a real world situation. But what you do want to make sure is that you always want to have an H1 on your page, and that is the most important piece of information. And this is not only for people with screen readers, but it's also for SEO. But you really want, like this tag here, if we inspect that, that is our H1, and you only want to have a single H1 on your page. So Google is saying that accessibility is mostly okay. Then it's saying that there's some items to manually check, and that's what we're going to check in the second part of the video. But now that we've gone through and used that tool, there's one other tool that we're going to use. It's called Wave. This is a free plugin that you can download for Chrome and Firefox, and I'll have a link down in the description where you can get this plugin. But that's this little button here, and we're just going to click that. And this is going to do another automated scan of the website and just show any issues that might come up. And you can see that when I've activated this scan, it's kind of messed with my markup a little bit, but it's going and it's adding its little notes, basically, to the website. And you can see, like, ARIA label, like, because this is a template I know to be pretty well accessible, it's picking up. Like, when I have a link on an image to Facebook, there's a label that tells the user, this goes to Facebook. That's one thing when you're building a website and you have an image that links somewhere. You want to give the user some context as to where they're going with the link when they're using a screen reader, because it may not be apparent just from the image, especially if the user's blind or isn't able to see that image. This tool's gone through, and looking at this site, like I said, I know this template's pretty well accessible, but there's only 2 errors, so let's take a look at those errors. And it's saying that there's empty button, which, yeah, this is something you don't want to do. You don't want to have a button that is without any content. So let's see if we can figure out where that is. So if we click this, so here's what it's referencing. And if we go to code, we can see what that button is. And if I look at where this button is, this is actually inside of that regallery that I mentioned previously. So this is a case where if you need a site to be super accessible, plugins may actually cause you some issues. Like the 2 empty button errors that are showing up here, these are from the regallery photo gallery plugin. So you can see there's not any errors on the actual template that is built for the website. It's an error coming from a WordPress plugin. They've got a couple of buttons here that don't have any input. So somebody with a screen reader might come across this button and not have any context as to what it does. But other than that, there's no errors on this page. If you did have a website with errors, they would show up here, and it might be things like images missing alt text, or it may be things like contrast errors. It's too hard to see. That would be something that shows up, and I can actually show you if I go to my website. I know this is one thing that I do need to work on a little bit, is this flag with the text in the background. I've tried to kind of increase the contrast so that people can see the text better by putting a blend on there, but there's a certain ratio that you need to meet with contrast when putting text on an image or putting text on a colored background. So if I go to details and I go to contrast errors, you can see it's complaining about the text on the background. So yeah, this is something to keep in mind if you are putting text on a background like this. It's a very common area where you're going to get some contrast errors for accessibility. It's one of those things you kind of have to weigh, what level of accessibility do you want versus the actual function of the website. In an ideal world, you would have both. But in a case like this, like I wanted this effect of text on a background, and in order to have the background visible enough to be seen with the text, there is that little bit of a contrast issue. So when taking accessibility into account, that's something to keep in mind is your contrast and your colors, and then doing manual testing and seeing where does that fall, and then tools like Wave here do a good job of kind of calling those out so you can do further review. And this is actually an area on my website I've been thinking about redoing, maybe redoing the header in a different format. Whereas you can see with this site, the header, there is no contrast issue because you just have white text with, a white background with the blue text here. So that's something to keep in mind when you're building a site. If we go back into Wave here, and we look, so there's no contrast errors, and then alerts. Alerts are something that you want to be aware of, but are not necessarily a deal breaker for accessibility. So it's mentioning the same thing that Google did about the skipped headings, just the heading levels. So I can see here, if I click this, and unfortunately the tool isn't the best at working with the markup. But if we click here, we can see the heading level was skipped. So looks like we maybe skipped an H2. We went straight from H1 to H3. And that's just due to how the markup of these blocks in WordPress is built out. So this is something, it's not crucial, but it's something to keep in mind. Ideally, you would go H1, H2, H3, but it's not always possible to do that based on your CMS. And then redundant link. This is happening, let's see, where is this happening? This is probably because there's a lot of areas. Yeah, so this is another area that is tricky with accessibility, and you kind of have to weigh the pros and cons. So if I reload the page, and if we go to, if we go here, so this element, think of this as one big piece here. We've got this image, we've got this text, and we've got this button. Now there's two ways that you could do this. I've done it here where you have the image as a link, the text is a link, and a button is a link. But somebody using a screen reader or a keyboard, they're going to have to go and this is one item they have to tab over. Then there's another item they have to tab over, and then there's a third item they have to tab over, and they're all linking to the same space. So sometimes when you have a component like this, you want to be able to just turn this all into one big link. And there's pros and cons to that. The pro is that somebody with a screen reader just has a single link that encompasses all of this information. The con of that is if you ever want the ability to put another link in this text area, or if I wanted to have two buttons next to each other, the second you have more than one link, that approach kind of falls apart. I did use that approach up here with these buttons this grid item, because this is an area that I know will always link to just one page. This image, this text, and this learn more, these are all going to link to the same spot. And this is an area where I've actually taken accessibility into account by reducing the number of links that are present on the page. This could be built as 1, 2, 3 separate links, but instead it's just a single link that somebody with a screen reader will tab over. Going back into Wave, looking at it, there's no more alerts. And then it just kind of calls out all of the different features of accessibility that you're using on your site. So the things in green are things that you're doing right. Like alternative text. Like if we look at an image, let's see, there's a lot of images on this page. We click one, alternative text. If I look at the code, we can see that there's this image here, and it looks like this is one of the people in the page, and there's an alt of just the person's name. So the alt text just lets somebody with a screen reader know what they're actually looking at as far as a picture. And then there's images with empty alternative text. That's if you have an image that's actually linking somewhere. It's actually better in a lot of cases to leave the alt text empty on an image that's inside of a link, unless you want to use that alt text to describe where the link is going. And that's something when you get into testing with a screen reader, you can actually hear what the browser is going to announce to somebody. So it's very kind of nuanced with that. You're depending on what you're trying to convey, whether it's the contents of the image or where the link is going. That's going to determine how you use the alt text within an image. And then it's just saying some other things that we've done right, and we're going to see that in the manual scan in a bit. So now we're going to go ahead and get out of Wave, and we're going to start our manual scan of this website using the narrator screen reader tool. So now we're going to go ahead and begin the manual audit process of this website. Now, if you're on Windows, the tool that you're going to want to use is called Narrator. I've got it down here in the taskbar, but if you don't have it down in the taskbar, you can just search for Narrator. It would help if I typed it right. And Narrator is just going to be here. If you click it, it's going to open right away, and it's going to start talking. Same thing with Mac. On a Mac, the program you want to use is called VoiceOver. I found on a Mac, if you're using VoiceOver, the best browser to use when testing is Safari, because that works best with the VoiceOver application. Here on Windows, I found that Chrome is the best browser to use with Narrator. But as soon as you open the screen reader program, it's going to start talking. And it's going to say what is on the screen. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start doing the accessibility audit. And when I'm doing that, I'm doing two things. The first thing that I'm doing is I'm looking to see, is the website navigable using only the keyboard? So if I go to this website, and I can even do this before I start using the screen reader, like I want to make sure that I can get to every element on the site using only the keyboard. Like you can see my mouse is right here, and I'm still able to navigate. If I go to services and I hit enter, I can open that menu and navigate to those. If I hit enter again, I close that. I can go here. I can go back and forth. And I can also check, I want to check to see if there's a bypass block. And what this bypass block is something that, like, if you come to the website, somebody who's really using a keyboard, they're going to be on the address bar here when they first come to the site, and they're going to be tabbing, and they might not want to go through all your navigation to get to the content on your site. So it's important that you have, as one of the first elements on your site, this bypass block, which is going to let them skip all your navigation and go straight to the content, which on this website, the content starts in that hero area here. If I go back to skip to content and hit enter, you'll see I get shifted, and my next keyboard focus is down here on this hero button. And then I can continue to tab through the rest of the site. But this is only part of it, because you can see I'm tabbing through the site, but this is helpful for somebody who can't use a mouse. However, it is not helpful for somebody using a screen reader. So we're going to go ahead and reload this site, and then we're going to open Narrator. And like I said, as soon as you open it, it starts talking. And what we're checking for is to see, is the website being enunciated back to the user in a way that makes sense. So I'm going to start this up, and then we're going to go through the website using our keyboard and see what somebody who is blind or has low vision would hear enunciated to them with the screen reader. So I'm going to click this, and it's going to open up. And I think it just started.
Skip to content link.
Yep.
630.
So it's going through.
Scan. Link. Bookmark this tab. Button.
Yeah, so the narrator has just started going through, and it looks like narrator on Windows starts going through the page automatically. You can take control of it with the tab and shift tab keys. So I'm going to go through and see how things are enunciated. So if I click
Hanover Renovations, Your Right website demo site.
So it's reading the title of the page now because I just shifted into that window.
Secondary navigation, link, 630-555-1234.
So you can see that as a part of the markup that we used on this site, it actually read aloud secondary navigation. So it lets somebody who can't see the navigation know this isn't the primary navigation for this website. It's a secondary nav, which in this case it is. It's where we have the phone number, the email, and the social media. So let's go ahead and move forward through this.
Second link, contact at Hanover Renovate, link, Facebook, link, Twitter, link, LinkedIn, link, Instagram, link, YouTube.
Okay, so that area, you heard it enunciate Facebook or Twitter when I hovered over with the keyboard the different icons. And that's important because somebody who's blind, if there's no markup to tell that user what that icon is, they're just not going to know what all those links are. So that's something when you're testing a website for accessibility. If you have something that's only an image, you want to make sure that that is being read aloud in a way that somebody who can't interpret the image with their eyes would still be able to get some value out of that image. So that's something that you can do using what's called ARIA markup. If you want a video that's a little more technical as far as how to make a website accessible, go ahead and leave something in the comments, and maybe I'll make that for my next video. But we're going to go ahead and we're going to move on now to the primary navigation.
Hanover Prime link, services, button, collapsed.
So you might have heard that. It said services button collapsed. And that's what it is because it's got a submenu. So if I click it, it's now expanded. And
link, bathroom renovation. Services, button, expanded.
Yeah, and I don't know why this...
Link, Hanover Renovations. Primary navigation, services, button, expanded.
Yeah, and that's something weird that screen readers do. It seems to only announce the kind of the context, like the primary navigation, when you go into that area. And I'm also not liking that it's not announcing that the button is expanded when the button expands. I've had better luck with VoiceOver on Mac, actually better enunciating when a button is toggled than Narrator on Windows. So that's something for me, for this website, to check, is there anything I can do to make that be enunciated? Now you can hear if I go off of it, like if I go to
primary link,
if I go to the next item,
link, portfolio.
Like if I go to the next item and then I go back to services,
link, services, button, expanded.
So it's enunciating it correctly that it's expanded. It's just that it's not correctly enunciating that the button is being open. Like if somebody is blind and they hit enter, they might not know that there's more there. Although if you tab
link, bathroom renovations,
you will be able to still get to that. So that's something.
Services, button, expanded.
So that's something I'm not liking about Narrator, is that it's not enunciating when I actually toggle the button. I feel like with VoiceOver on Mac, it actually does that. And that's another thing too. Screen readers are kind of, there are standards for accessibility, but they all, in my experience, have kind of done things a little bit differently. It's kind of like working with HTML emails. You know, there's a way to do it, and then they all kind of interpret it a little bit differently. So how close you're going to get with the screen reader will actually depend on which screen reader you're using. In this case, the best option I have access to is Narrator, but it is correctly enunciating that the button is expanded or closed when I come into it. So that's telling me at least the code that I have is working properly, because there's some JavaScript that's detecting when that button opens and closes. That's telling me the code's working properly. It's just maybe there's another parameter I need to make the screen reader work properly with the enter key press, or maybe it's just something that with Narrator it's different from VoiceOver in that it doesn't update on the change of state the same way VoiceOver would do. So if I go ahead, I'm going to actually close this area, and I'm
Hanover Renovate, primary navigate.
Yeah, so I'm going to close that area, and I'm going to continue
Link,
on
portfolio.
with the nav.
Link, about us. Link, contact. Link, get a free estimate.
Yep, so the nav, that's the primary nav, and again, if I shift out of it,
Link, Hanover Renovations.
if I shift back into it, you're going to hear it enunciate that it's the primary nav.
Primary navigation, services, button, collapsed. Link, 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 start my renovation.
Yeah, so now we're moving on to the rest of the website. And the Start My Renovation section, this is the hero of the website. And by default, when you're tabbing through the website, like you might have noticed, it's not going to read the header. And that's something with screen readers, like you shouldn't expect it to read that header because that's not actually a tabbable item. But the user should have the ability, if they use the arrow
Hanover
keys,
Renovations, your right website demo, no previous item.
Yeah.
Link, container for site logo, primary navigate, link, link. At Hanover Renovations, we bring your vision to life with our specialized expertise in kitchen, bathroom, and basement renovations. Let us turn your house into the home of your dreams.
Yeah, so you can see with the screen reader, you can use the arrow keys to move up and down on the page. So the fact that you tab to the button and it doesn't read the rest of that information, that's to be expected. That's something where if the screen reader user wants to explore that further, they can navigate with the arrow keys. And there are also different ARIA tags that you can use for sections. And those are sometimes read aloud by the screen reader. It depends on the context. I found they are not super reliable, depending on what context you're in. But in a case like this, really with the screen reader, it's just going to read aloud the things that the user can tab to, and the user can use the arrow keys to learn more about a given section. So we're going to move on to the next section of the site.
Hanover, link, your dream kitchen awaits. Custom designs tailored to your lifestyle revitalize your cooking experience with our stunning kitchen renovations. Learn more.
Yeah, so you can see for this next section, contrary to what I just said 30 seconds ago, it actually read everything aloud. And the reason for that is calling back to earlier in the video when I said you can either make this a single link or you can make this 1, 2, 3 links. And because this is all inside of a link and it's something the user can tab to, the screen reader decided to read that all aloud. So that's why I jumped from that one area where it didn't read anything to this area where everything was read aloud. It's because it's inside of a link. So if I tab through the rest of these items, you're going to see it's going to read this all aloud.
Link, create your personal oasis with our luxurious bathroom remodeling solutions. Indulge in relaxation with our beautifully designed bathroom spaces. Learn more. Link, maximize your home's potential with our expert basement renovation services. Transform your basement into a functional and stylish living area. Learn more.
Yeah, so that goes back to what I mentioned. You know, do you make it 1 link? Do you make it 3 links? And you can see too, as I'm tabbing through these items, I only have to tab on the one item because it's all one link. So that's why these things are being read aloud. So we're going to move on to the next section of the website, which is the gallery. And I'm curious how this is going to be handled because this is a third-party plugin.
Link, start, link, 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 blueprints with pencil.
Okay, so that is interesting. That is interesting. It looks like this gallery here is actually completely invisible to the keyboard. So that tells me I'm not actually able to tab into this item. Like if I
Hanover close previous next a beautiful luxury master bath with double vanity. This master bath features double vanities, double mirrors and inbuilt storage for clothing and toiletries. Group.
Yeah, so it looks like I can actually click into it, and once the modal for the images in the gallery opens, that is being read by the screen reader. But the actual grid of images, there's nothing in place, it looks like, to actually detect or actually allow the keyboard to tab onto that item. So that's something, like I mentioned, with plugins. You need to be careful of their accessibility. This is why it's important to do a manual scan, because that's when you find things that are not in the automated scan. Like the automated scan said there were only 2 issues with this plugin. But if you have a site where you need a high level of accessibility and you have this gallery, it's essentially invisible to somebody who's just using a keyboard. So the fact that I've got this modal open, let's see, can we tab through
group, to get missing image descriptions, open the context menu, previous, next. To get missing image descriptions, open the context menu, unlabeled. To get missing image descriptions, Hanover Renovations, your right website demo site.
Yeah, so there's something going on with this plugin where it's not fully accessible, and that's something we can only determine by doing a manual scan like this. So that's something where when you're picking a plugin, if you, like I said, if you need a high level of accessibility, you need to be aware of, the limitations of the plugin that you're using. And that's really something, there's no database that's going to tell you how accessible a plugin is. Unless the plugin authors have made accessibility a priority, it's something that you will just find by trial and error, essentially. So depending on the context of your site, if you're using a plugin like I am with WordPress, you will want to be aware of how accessible that plugin is. So for this audit, we're going to actually just go ahead, we're going to skip ahead to the next part of the website, which is another block that I built. So if we take a look at this, in contrast to the previous section of the website, which had the whole area as one link, this is actually 3 separate links. So let's see how that gets handled.
Link, blueprints with pencil.
Okay, so now we've clicked into this section, and you can see it read the alt text aloud, the alt text for the image. But this is a link. So this is one of those areas where you ask yourself, what do I really want read aloud? Because this is a link, does it make sense to read the alt text of the image, or does it make sense to add other text that tells the user that this is a link that leads to another location? And that is really something that is going to be left up to you on a case-by-case basis. Like in this case, I think it makes sense to read out the alt text and tell you what it is, especially given the context of the items that come after it. Like if we go to the next item that's a link, it's going to read it out loud. And I keep getting my focus stolen because I'm trying to film this from Linux in a Windows VM, and the focus keeps getting stolen. That's why things keep kind of jumping back and forth. But if I click back into here...
Hanover link. Discover the exceptional benefits of partnering with Hanover Renovations today. Link. Get an estimate.
Yeah, so you can see by going through the context, by going first from the image to the heading to the button, you can get a better idea of the context of what you're dealing with, and that this is a place to get an estimate for a home renovation. So we're going to move on to the next section. And this section here, there actually are no
Hanover
links.
renovation link. Get a free estimate.
Yeah, so this section here.
Ready to bathroom remodel in 20. Jane M. Image.
Yeah, this section here, there's actually no links in this section. So this is a section where instead of tabbing, the user would have to use the keyboard to navigate.
Jane M. Bathroom remodel in 2021. I purchased a new to me house in 2021 that was almost perfect, except the guest heading level 3. Transform your home today.
Yeah, so this section here with the testimonials, because there's actually no link in this section, it's harder to gain the context of what this section is. Unless somebody went through and started at the top of this section is one that would probably need a little bit of work if you wanted to meet a higher accessibility standard, just because it is more missable than the other sections of the website because there isn't a link. And that's another thing where maybe a section label is necessary. It should be that once you tab into a section, the screen reader is able to gain more information from that. And I will admit I don't have a lot of experience using screen readers in particular, just because I'm not somebody who needs one. There are things that can be done if you wanted it to be more noisy. If you wanted it to say the section allowed at every time a screen reader entered that section, you could potentially put a section label on that. So for this section, there is no link. So when we tab, we are actually skipping over this section, and this is something that the user can get to only with the keyboard, just because there is no link that's tying into this section. Now, there are things that you can do to make it where this section is visible, even though there isn't a link. There's certain ARIA markup that you can put. And that might be something if you are trying to reach a higher accessibility standard that you want to add in. Now, here we're using WordPress, so we're using automated blocks. And it's a trade-off. It's really a trade-off of how accessible do you want the site to be versus how much work do you want on the back end for somebody who's managing the site. Like, I could force somebody to always have a section label for this section, and I could also force this section to be tabbable when somebody's tabbing using a screen reader. As far as the section label, is that something that we want somebody to always have to put in? Is that something that we can use existing data?
Hanover renovations, your right website demo site, heading level 3, capo selected.
Sorry about that. But is that something that we want to enforce on the back end? It's kind of a tricky situation sometimes with accessibility, and unfortunately, there's really no right or wrong answer sometimes. Like with this, the user can technically get to everything here using the keyboard. If they wanted to get the context of this, they could. It's just a little more difficult. And there's things that we could do to make it easier for them. So that's maybe an area where this website falls a little short on, some of the higher accessibility standards. But it's also, how much work do we want on the back end? Our client who's managing the site, do we want them to be putting in multiple accessibility fields for every block that they're putting on the site? Is that something they can manage? Is that something where the headline of the block would make a valid section title? Like the way that these blocks are built, there's a lot of fields that are optional. So this headline might not actually be required. None of this text may be required. So that's when you have a system like WordPress that's dynamic. I can't just say, this headline text, that's going to be the section header for accessibility purposes, because I might have a case where this block doesn't have a headline or any text. It may just be these 3 pictures. So that's something to keep in mind as you're building a website. Where is this accessibility data coming from? And oftentimes there's this tug of war between, how accessible can I make the site and how is it going to be to manage this site on the back end. So this is an area, through this audit, I'm finding maybe I want to address this a little bit better, especially considering, there's no link here. It's kind of invisible to a user who's using a screen reader unless they actively kind of seek this area out by tabbing through the site and using the keyboard. So scrolling down to the bottom, we've got this last section of the site. And this does have a link here. So if I click back into here,
link, get a free estimate.
You can hear it enunciates that link.
Ready to elevate your living space? Contact our expert team for a free, personalized home renovation consultation.
And then by just hitting the up arrow, I was able to get into the rest of the context for that. So if I scroll down now to the bottom of the site, we've just got the footer left.
Hanover, link, content info, link, Hanover renovations. Link, Facebook. Link, Twitter.
So you can hear it's enunciating those icons again. Because those are images, we do want some markup there to tell the user what the image actually means. So if we scroll...
Hanover renovation, content, link, your right website. Link, bathroom renovations. Link, kitchen renovations.
Yeah, so just going through the rest of the footer.
Link, about, link, email, edit, required, scan off.
Yeah, so you can see the footer, we can tab through that pretty easily. We have the email field, it read aloud the form label properly.
Hanover, content, link, email, sign up, button, scan.
And then we have the sign up button, and I can get to the rest of the form.
By entering your email, you are giving Hanover Renovations permission to email.
We can get to the rest of the form just by using the arrow keys to get to the rest of that context. So as far as the accessibility audit, you can see just kind of at a high level how I've tested this site using a screen reader. And you can see there's some things that I actually discovered while going through this site that maybe can be done better. Like I said, if you're building a site, there's things with accessibility that if you can be more accessible, but it also creates more work for the user who's actually managing the website. And there are certain things, like I said, like with this testimonials, you could make this more accessible, but it's going to be more work for the person managing the site, potentially, and more confusing on the back end. So it's something, if you want to be more accessible, can be by adding certain elements to the page. And if you want a video of me actually building a accessible website, go ahead and leave a comment, and that might be something for a future video. Now, this website, I would say, is one of the better ones as far as accessibility, just because even though we did find a few issues with the site, the majority of the website can be accessed with the keyboard. There were no what I would call focus traps, meaning the keyboard doesn't get stuck in a loop where users can't get out of it. Sometimes you see that with websites where they have like a pop-up or a video or something like that where the keyboard actually keeps going in circles and the user can never get out of it. There's no what I would call major issues with accessibility on this site, but there are some things like this testimonial section that perhaps could be done better. And if this was a site that was being hand-coded completely from scratch with a goal of accessibility, I would probably do this a little bit differently. But because these blocks are made to be something that's kind of versatile and used in multiple different ways, it's something where accessibility sometimes is a little bit harder to implement, like in this specific case. Anyway, this has been a video from Your Right website. If you are interested in having your website scanned for accessibility, I do offer a service where I will go through and I will audit your website the same way I just did in this video. For one page, it is $50, and if you want to audit 3 pages of your website, it's a flat fee of $100, and a link for that will be down in the description. Anyway, hope this video was helpful to you. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments, and I will see you next time. Bye.